In being a woman who has it all, do you ever feel trapped and suffocated? Feeling like you have so much responsibility at home with your children and your spouse and then your work, especially if you're an entrepreneur, it can get so overwhelming. Now that we're in the pandemic, there's even more pressure on you. Today's guest, Ameé Quiriconi, she knows how that feels. She used to feel like a broken mom, and she had to make a choice about how to take care of herself for the good of the family. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to the great mystery beyond the veil, to those moments of connection that are just profound in the insight that we receive when we're willing to look just under the surface in a new direction, even just a different way of perceiving things, and all of a sudden things change and a new world is forming in front of your eyes, and you don't even know what that world is or what it means. And it can feel a little bit like sliding off the surface of the old way of knowing the world, and which feels a little scary to slide right off that surface and go, where is this thing heading? It's all falling apart. But then things tend to right themselves in a new configuration that is just so much more amazing. And I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. I have these conversations on Soul Nectar Show week after week to support you in what we're going through right now collectively, which is a huge awakening process. And in the middle of that process, an individual process, let's just say for a person going through that process, it's a lot to go through. And now we're all doing it collectively. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, well, that's because we have a lot going on. And it's understandable to feel overwhelmed in the middle of all that. And if you're a mom in the middle of the picture too, like trying to hold as grounded, loving a space as you can for those you care for, your children or your aging parents, or maybe you have a job that's got you as a nurturer for others, you can feel a bit overwhelmed by you know, um, just their sense of overwhelm. So how do we get grounded? How do we get secure? And how do we lead our lives? And those are the conversations I love to have on Soul Nectar Show to help people navigate these times, which can be really exciting. When you're in a different perspective, it can be really exciting. So today's guest, I just love when I met Ameé Quiriconi. Welcome to the show.
I'm here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. When I met Ameé, you're going to love her. She's the founder of Activity Girl, and she helps entrepreneurs, leaders, and organizations through leadership coaching and consulting. And she's the host of the mental health podcast, One Broken Mom, and the author of The Fearless Woman's Guide to Starting a Business, What Every Woman Needs to Know to Be Courageous, Authentic, and Unstoppable Entrepreneur. Just like so right up my alley. I just felt like such a sister in the game of life here on earth at this time, and I'm just so glad to have you on the show with us.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited. When we talked a few weeks ago, I felt that same thing. It was just like, the universe just draws us in and brings us to, cool people. Once we're able to get out of whatever the world or, thing that we thought we were supposed to be living, and we take, like you described at the top here, like slipping off that slope and into something else. And then once you do that and you find your feet underneath you, it's kind of cool, who ends up coming into that new realm. So and you're definitely one of those. So it's fun to be here with you.
It's so exciting to encourage other people too to take this journey. It's like I finally learned how to make the magic for myself, and then I started learning how to bring others with me. That's the coolest part, is to help others like find their own way through that doorway. I know that we're in the middle of a crazy time, and so part of what I like to do is share people's stories as the beginning part of our broadcast. Because I feel like if you hear someone else's story, you might pick up some key points in their journey that relate to yours that help you really like go, oh, like a benchmark, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm kind of in that spot right now. Cool. I'm curious to see how me navigated that and where it led, you know? So that's one of the reasons I always start with people's stories. And I'd love to start with yours right now, wherever you want to pick it up. Like, where did you start making the connections that things needed to change and you're going to move in a new direction in your life?
That's a great place to start the story, because that happened in 2017 for me, and that's when the connections were made. Now, the journey to that point started several years before that. I grew up in the Midwest. I, moved out at 18, got a college education, got married right after college, moved up to Seattle because it was the coolest city in the world. And back in, 95, I came in here at the tail end of the music scene and was able to see the presidents of the United States of America before they got big. And so that was fun for me because I still am a huge music fan. And, I wasn't tethered to anything that kept me back in Kansas. In fact, I was looking for a way to get out, and at that time, I didn't really know why I felt so strongly about leaving. But I just knew that there was no way I was staying, no matter how much pressure I had from family members and, and even at school, because I had job offers in the Midwest to take. And I said, nope, screw that. I'm going to go find my own job up in Seattle. And that, threw everybody off. And they're, why would she want to do that? But I moved out here and I was only married for a couple of years to my high school sweetheart before I just felt like I felt more at home in Seattle than I did in Kansas. And so once I actually got out, I was like, man, this is more my people. I'm in a community and an environment that feels better to me. While my husband at the time was, counting the days until we moved back to Kansas. And I just knew I couldn't do it. And then in the course of that, I ended up meeting who would be my second husband and would be the father of my children, and was in a relationship with him for 10 years. And in that world, I chose consciously to become a mother. And then in 2000, oh God, when was this? 2010, 2011, actually it started in 2009, the recession hit. And at that time in my life, I had invented a recycled content countertop product. I was running a manufacturing company. I was doing all the cool things. I was also being a mom, and I was featured on TV. And I thought that it was great. But, within a period of like 3 months in 2009, I had a 6-figure option to buy my manufacturing company. And that exact same business was then 3 months later filing for bankruptcy. Because when the recession hit hard, and it hit mostly in the real estate industry and in the construction and architecture industry, which was exactly where I was working. So I went from feeling like I was thriving and just crushing life to not knowing really what I needed to do or what I wanted to do next. And I made an emotional decision. And the emotional decision was, instead of closing my manufacturing company, I would take on a business partner and I would continue for another couple of years. And that would be the beginning of a dark period that I call my dark woman phase. I changed. The partnership was unhealthy and toxic, and it caused resentment in my marriage. And at the same time, I have these two little human beings. One's like 5 years old and one's like 2 years old. And so I would come home from a toxic situation with this really just corrosive partnership, and I'd get no support from my partner, and I'd have these two little humans that needed me, and I got overwhelmed fast. I went from being, I'm into this to be a mom, and I'm going to be a better mom than my mom ever was, and it'll be amazing, to suddenly feeling trapped, suffocating. And I mean, it still brings tears to my eyes. I still feel all of that, the trauma of what was going on to me in my psyche and my body, and how I feel so much regret, even though it's, not my fault, but I feel regret over how all of that shook out. I ended up getting divorced. And in the course of the divorce, the decision was to my husband to be the custodial parent, because he was honestly the guy who showed up for all the teacher meetings while I just had my head down and I was all about business and entrepreneurship and, and all that, fun stuff for me. And then we decided that too, because it would allow me to maybe spend the time that I needed in my business to see if I couldn't salvage it. If I couldn't salvage the relationship, if I couldn't pull the company back together, if I couldn't survive the recession. And I felt relieved. And I know that there's a lot of women that would probably feel the exact same way I do, but in our culture, women can't feel relieved at having the burden of being the mother lifted from their shoulders. I mean, we're judged, we're scorned, lots of nasty words talked about women who, can't be moms or can't figure out what to do for, momming. And but I admit it today that like it felt like such a huge relief off my shoulders because I did know what I was doing. Motherhood got really hard really fast and I couldn't figure out how to balance it. And this period of time between then 2009 up until 2017, I felt like I was figuring things out, but in reality, I was just going deeper and deeper and deeper. And by the time 2017 came around, I was without another business. And I was out another romantic relationship. But the key thing is that the early part of that year, my kid's dad got to a place where he could no longer handle the custodial parent position. Like emotionally, it was different because the kids were now becoming teenagers. And that's a whole nother realm of, parenting challenges when our kids begin to individuate from us and want to be their whole humans that they really are. And I decided that there was no way that I was saying anything but yes to bringing my kids in. And I was just going to figure out how I needed to show up and be a mom. And that caused that forced my current personal relationship at that time to end, which I needed to end anyways, because it was an abusive situation. And come 2017, I'm like, okay, wow, I'm like in chaos mode here. Like I have no money. I am drained emotionally. I've got these two kids that need me. I don't know, like, am I cursed? Like what's going on in my life? I need to figure this all out. And so instead of figuring out how to build the next cool business, I took all of those problem solving skills that I have and this deep drive to understand, and I just applied it to myself. And I thought deeply about my situation and examined it. And by the end of the year, I realized what was going on, which was I had a lot of unresolved trauma in my past. The person that I became was the result of dysfunction and survival. And yeah, I had done a really good job of surviving it, but at the expense of not understanding it. And when I got into things like the neuroscience behind our brain architecture and how it comes to be and how emotions become designed and developed into our system and how habits are formed, it all started to make sense for me of what I actually needed to change finally. And my rebirth day is December 17th of 2017. That's the day that it all, like, the switch went into my head and my life had never been the same since. But most importantly, on that day, I realized that I had a chance, if I took it, to be able to course correct for my children, because I was going to bestow onto them the generations of trauma that I had inherited from my mother, that she had inherited from her experiences that had been passed down from, the generation before. And I was honestly repeating history and had no idea that I was doing it, that I was a woman who didn't want a mother like my mother did, but yet I was mothering exactly the same way my mother did. And then when I saw that, I felt sick to my stomach. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed. I mean, all the feelings of like feeling like I failed at motherhood. And for a while, that's what I said. I said, I failed at motherhood. But then I realized I didn't have tools for motherhood. And so I needed to go get tools. These are things that I could develop and change. And then that led me into thinking to myself, this is really hard. And people struggle with this every day. Is there something that I can bring to the world that can help that for other people? And that's why I started my podcast, One Broken Mom, in May of 2018 to coincide with Mother's Day and Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm going to start sharing my journey vulnerably. I'm going to reach out to experts. I'm going to bring them in, ask them all the questions I want to ask and that other people want to know about. And in the course of that, my show developed into what it is today, which is these frank, candid conversations about childhood trauma, dysfunction, understanding it, unpacking it, looking at it from a lot of different angles, and then figuring out how to apply it to our lives so that we can grow and improve from that. And it's been, a tremendous journey, and it's been a long and patient, journey of healing myself from all of that and getting on top of it, and then bringing it back into how does it affect us at work? That's my niche focus. And also, obviously, how does it affect us as adults and as parents? So, I mean, that's kind of the overview of the journey so far.
Wow, really powerful your share. I mean, I could find myself in so many points of things that you said along the way. It's just potent. Can take a moment and just say congratulations for making it through the Ring of Fire gauntlet of your life that, led you here. And I really believe that there's so many of us, and as you know, because you're a podcast host, we're connecting all the time with these people, people, men, women, whatever gender, like out there that have faced these challenges and have overcome them all alone and then emerge on the other side. And it's almost like there's this big circle of people holding hands and saying, come on, sister, come on, brother, come on, other one, like, come on in the circle. We see you, you did it. Congratulations, you made it through. We're on the other side. And now let's help the others, let's help everybody else get here too. And then from that place, I feel like we can look back on our previous life's experience and say, I needed to go through that ring of fire so I could be purified, so I could come out the other side as a human being integrated with all my choices, like not shunning any aspect of myself, not wishing it wasn't so. I went through all those moments too, like, oh, I wish it wasn't so. I wish I had done it differently, guilting and shaming myself. Definitely being guilted and shamed by my family of origin, and moving through that to claim my own sovereignty. It's like, well, there's a bigger, higher truth here, right? Like there's a truth beyond what everyone thinks is the thing. It's well beyond that. And for me, it's like this soul's journey. It's like 2 decades in psychotherapy. Why? Because I needed to understand my mind. If I'm going to be a spiritual leader, I need to understand myself. And so that's how my soul chose to bring me through the process. So it's fine. I think that we just need to give ourselves some grace, right? And accept the journey was planned as part of what we had to go through.
Yeah, totally. I had a conversation with Dr. Lindsay Gibson. She's written a series of books about adult children of emotionally immature parents, which was, just a huge eye-opening for me in terms of me having subtext to, my life experiences. And she talks about the story of a Greek goddess. I can't remember the Greek goddess's name, but the idea that as before our souls enter the earth, we sit on the lap of the goddess, and the goddess whispers into our ear what our purpose is, and then pushes, closes our mouth, and that's where the indentation is, right above our lips. And then as soon as she does that, we forget our purpose, and then we're sent to the earth to spend our life doing the things and exploring in order to discover what that purpose is. And when she told that story to me once, the first time I teared up. I felt that emotion because I felt like that on December 17th of 2017, that's exactly what happened. Was all of a sudden with blinding light. Seriously, like I was just shocked and my system just stunned for a moment where I was like, holy crap, I get it. I get it. Like I see this now.
I know why I went through all that crap.
Yeah. And you go through that and you're just like, and I've described people like, when we talk about discovering purpose, for anybody that's had kids, the first child, you're always like, am I going to know when I'm in labor? And I remember asking, my doula and birthing coaches and everybody like, how will I know? And everybody's like, you'll just know. And then when you go into labor, your very first time, you're like, yes, of course you're just going to, you do know. Like there's nothing about it that tells you that this might be it. Like you don't even have to ask. And I felt like that's how I felt like with describing when you find purpose. Like if you're not sure, you haven't gotten quite there yet, because once it's there, it's just like, this is it, done.
It's kind of like orgasm.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
That was my pathway. Because with my sons, like I actually had C-sections both times because they wouldn't come out. And I even waited an extra month with the first one. And he was like, nope, I like it in here. I don't want to come out. So I had children of resistance right from the beginning. They were like, I don't know about this life plan I chose. So anyway, yeah, I found out mine with orgasm because I was like, did I have it? Is that what it is? I'm not sure. Is that? And then all of a sudden, and see, my spiritual awakening started when I had my first one because my friend invited me to this slumber party thing. And she said, hey, just come look at these toys. And I was like, because of my own traumas in early childhood, I wasn't comfortable with my body. I was always like kind of holding that kind of thing at arm's distance. And I bought one of those things. And that is when I started like, woo, like it's just, wow. And, it kind of a lot of feelings about that, like, wow, this is amazing. And you bastard, you had this for 20 years and I didn't get it. Oh man, I was pissed then. And then it's kind of hard to forgive somebody after all that. So, You know, it's like you just don't recover from that. Anyway,
Yeah.
I couldn't. So, you know, this is an interesting thing is like once you actually do wake up, it's a really interesting because like I was telling somebody the other day, these conversations are so easy on the other side of waking up. It's like there's just like an ease and grace to the flow of the conversation. It's amazing how it works that way. And whereas conversations with people maybe mid journey or something like that, they're a little more like start and stop. Like there's a little sputtering in there. There's like it's not quite as fluid, right? And I
Hmm.
think it's just because we've got that egoic resistance like pushing against this. There's this refinement that's happening. Talk a little bit about that because that is a really interesting process of like getting out of the way, but it actually is the way.
Yeah, it is. And I know exactly what you're talking about because, with what I do on my show, I interview a lot of people. For the most part, I tend to interview people that like again have written books and have like really well-formed journeys and things to share my audience and my listeners because, I can help them, but also I want to, connect people with other people because we don't all link together and all connect at the same levels with one another. But sometimes I'll bring on like trauma survivors and they're, when I get the timeline here, I know that they're like a couple of years into this journey of awareness and you can actually hear it. And you can actually also sense it. So when you ask some questions, they're not really ready to answer fully. It still doesn't feel. And I've had like some interviews like, "Hey, don't say that," or "I don't," they're that vulnerability, like it's still raw right
Mm-hmm.
there. And it's not like we just become completely scarred over that we don't feel anymore. But I feel like where we get to once we go through this healing of being able to make some peace and find some compassion for that experience, I feel like we're able to look back at this other person we were almost as if they are a different person and actually be a third person viewer telling a story of something that we've witnessed because now we're seeing it through different eyes. And that's why for me it is easy to, while I still feel it, like my own experiences traumatized me as well as all the other things that had actually happened, and I don't expect that to go away very easily. I can talk about my experience as if that happened to this other woman that I was. It's me and it's not like who I am today. And so that journey is to be able to get to where you can fully envelop this new person and perspective and then look back from an objective and compassionate point so that you can dissect and understand so that you can continue to grow and keep moving forward there. And how long it takes people to do that, I mean, it depends on the person, but you almost, my commitment was I'm going all in. And I
Mm-hmm.
decided to do that for my kids because I call this my fiercest act of motherhood. If I don't do this, then shame on me for knowing what I need to do and then being too afraid to not do it because of, that fear. When these kids, you know what, Ami, you brought them in, you committed to being a better mother. So this is what better mother looks like. This means actually getting can I say some words on here, adult
Yeah.
words on your show?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, get your shit together. Otherwise, again, shame on you for not doing something about it. And so that was weekly therapy sessions and unpacking it and just saying, I'm here for all of this and then doing work between therapy sessions. It's not just go to therapy, cry it out, and then go back to the same old. It is, what do I have to do every single day to create these changes in my life to get to a place where I can show up as the mom they need to be. And there are many days, even still today, but for, in the early stages where I realized how often my little person had been showing up as their mother and not their mother. And so then when I learned that skill of, okay, you got to mother you and them at the same time. I'm sitting here, kind of comforting the discomfort and the trapped feeling and all the little things that were like my little human that had been traumatized by her own mother. I'm calming her down so that I can be the person that I know that my kids need to be. And it's not easy. It's messy. It's painful. I wished that as soon as I turned that switch on in my head, my kids were suddenly healed of all their traumas. Well, no, like talk about a disappointment. That didn't happen. It was like, wow, we're in this one for a long time, we still go, but I mean, we're making strides and it's vastly, improved over what it was like 4 years ago, when this journey actually started. But like to be able to share, frankly, like I said, I feel like who I'm talking about, like I actually named her the dark woman. Like that dark woman lived and breathed and then died. And when she died, that's when I was free to, take the next step and become, the more authentic version of who I was. And I was able to actually leave her where she was. I was able to love her and feel badly for her experiences, forgive her for some of the things that she did because that was who she was and what she knew at that time. But I leave her where she belongs, which is in this one chapter of my history. And then I talk about and I share her experiences with everybody.
Yeah, and it's that really shift in identity and even beyond, like for me, it was a shift outside of thinking of myself as one solid thing called Carrie that had like come into this and I'm only in this body into, oh, I'm more than that. I'm the essence that created this being called Carrie. And and I've had lots of lifetimes, and this is one of them, and it's a series of lessons. It's like shifting the identity of who you think you are actually opens up like this whole ability to have conversation about yourself and your life journey from a different perspective that's like outside that victim, rescuer, perpetrator, victim consciousness conversation. And along those same lines, it's like as a mom, and I'm pretty sure many moms resonate with me. I wanted to be the perfect mom. Like I wanted to be like the perfect mom and do it all right, and and have kids that like were stars of the school play, and stars of the soccer team, and my kid's awesome and getting A's and all of this kind of stuff. And then right from the beginning, when my older son wouldn't comply with that, I was confronted with, oh crap, why isn't this happening? Why he has love and support, I give him so much love, like why is it not working? And it's because I was a little child parenting my baby, like you talked about, and I didn't even know it. I was still being the maiden who needed to be rescued instead of the mother who knows best. Like that's a whole different energetic there. And what's interesting is that as I look back on it, and my kids watched me go through my spiritual dark night of the soul and my reclaiming of myself, they watched me in a puddle on the floor many, many times, where I'm just like, I just came back from a spiritual retreat or something, and I'm just like a mess, because of all the things that got stirred up that need healing. And I thought judging myself for a while about that. Like, wow, I'm supposed to have it all together. I'm supposed to show them really put together adult, and here I'm like just showing them like this messy soup of a person that's like seems like she might be 3, and other times might be 17. And I finally realized I actually did okay because I demonstrated the pathway of facing all the dark crap inside of yourself and bringing love to it. And I showed them what it looks like to survive a dark night of the soul. I mean, I think we're in a time when everyone is going to need to know how to survive a dark night of the soul. So I actually showed them exactly the curriculum they need right now. It's just that my ego doesn't like being imperfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I hear you, and I can't relate to that idea of motherhood. Like that wasn't even at all for me what I was doing. I mean, I only knew I didn't want to be like my mother. Like that was literally my metric. And for me, it was not about having like this script of what success looks like. It was about letting my kids be whoever they wanted to be because I was not allowed to be whoever I wanted to be. And so, that was, I remember even when they were like, when my son was a baby, people would ask me like my thoughts on college. Now I have 2 degrees. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. So you would think my answer would be like, college is amazing. And I was like, my kids don't want to go to college. They shouldn't go to college. I mean, I want them to do what's right for them. I think it's, because I remember being in college and seeing kids that were there with me who were forced into the role and the kind of the mode, and they were miserable and they were depressed and anxious and they didn't know how to leave because their parents were telling them they couldn't, and they dropped out anyways, and they were stayed in it and wasted all the money. And I thought, well, that just seems like a complete waste of everyone's time and energy. Why don't we just let people decide for themselves what they should do and whether or not college fits, And so, for me, the challenges that I ended up having in this role with mother was just, I unpacked the fact that I was an oldest daughter in my family. And when you have an emotionally immature mother who actually was traumatized by becoming a mother, like she became pregnant at a young age, she had intense pressures to continue on and to, carry on this child, get married. She ended up marrying an abusive person. She was trapped into a life that, I honestly, if my mother had been given choices, would have never chosen to be a mom. She had said that many times. But she went with what was told and what people expected her to do. And then that was how, the environment I grew up in. So then I end up with, as soon as I show myself to be a highly capable little human, like, being called a little adult is one of the worst things we can do to little kids because they're just children. They may be capable
Exactly.
and they may be intelligent, but they're children. And so when the little adult, highly capable version of me started to show up, and then other siblings started to arrive in the family, I was put in charge of taking care of them so that my mother could be relieved of her mothering duties. And so that was where I came from. My sense of motherhood was, wow, it feels like it's a trap because I grew up trapped into the role of having to be a caretaker for other small humans when I didn't want to, but I didn't know how to get out of it, out of a fear of being sent away or abandoned or given. I mean, there's all of that, small details in the storyline here. And so I became extremely compliant and resented. And so by the time I was 18 years old, I was full of anger. I was full of resentment. The last thing I wanted to do was to have a kid. Like I left with no desire to have kids. So then when I come to a place in my life where suddenly my maternal instincts kick in, I have no sense of resolution of all those past feelings about how I really felt about being around and having to be called upon to put my needs aside to take care of other people. Like that never got worked out. And so I carried all of that unseen challenge into, my relationship and into, parenting. And so lo and behold, when suddenly it got that showed up and I had to, do that, and I had no resources, I had no other support in there, I began to resent, like all the resentment and the anger and everything else came back in. And that's where I was like, man, I said I wasn't going to be my mother. And yet here I was exactly being my mother,
That's powerful. Yes. Gosh, I can so relate to that, like being a very capable human. And I was an only child, so I wasn't put in charge of other people, but I was left to my own devices, like constantly. And that same feeling of like, there's some gap here. Like, I feel like I should be getting intimacy or closeness or some love or something. And I get little moments of it, and then I'm like kind of pushed away because, people have their limits as to what they are emotionally capable of sharing with each other, right? And then I just wanted to pour love all over I slimed my kids, like I just like love slimed them. And that was too much too, because that's like the intrusive parent, right? Like it didn't even know that love could be intrusive, but like there's also that, and so it's like just over concern. So I think that we're navigating some interesting topics here about like our ideas about what mothering is and what it's not, and what are we prefer it to be like, and what we don't prefer it to be like, and what we think would have been best for our kids, and then what actually happened. And see, isn't that the whole part of the discussion though? It's like it's a setup, like no matter what way you look at it, right? Isn't it a setup? It's a setup, right? Talk about
Yeah.
that.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's the God. There is no good manual for this, right?
Yeah,
Because
there's
humans
no
are
manual.
humans. Yeah. And I talk about this quite a bit. We are the sum of the DNA and the experiences. And those two things we had no choices over. I mean, they happened, right? And then here we are the things, those two things. And then you're supposed to have a manual for how you should have been parented by people that didn't have their own manuals. And then you go off into, motherhood without a manual. And probably the only thing that we just need to know that we've really never been taught is that we are all going to be unique. We're going to bring into this world our temperament, which will be that DNA thing. And we don't know how the DNA is going to shake together between what I brought to the table and what the sperm donor brought to the table. Right. So then it's kind of like there's a wait and see. And, but like, you'd mentioned earlier, modeling how to get through life is probably the only thing that we really need to know. And if we can't do that, then that's the skills that we need to build, because the rest of that stuff will work itself out. Our children will go explore what they want, and they will go become who they want to be. And I feel like at the end of the day, for me, like, my role as mom is to support, secure, love, them, And then if be able to show them how to discern their emotional relationship with themselves and with other people, and how to protect themselves, with healthy boundary settings of knowing that there is a beginning and an end to who we are and who the next person is, and that's okay, that we should do things that make us feel safe, because having gone through trauma, that's one of the things that most of us lack, is this understanding of how do I become safe again with myself. And it doesn't mean building up walls, because if you still feel very anxious and depressed within your walls, that's still not safe for you. It is this inner safety that we can create. And because once we feel that fortitude in our own hearts and minds, then we're able to assert and protect ourselves from the rest of the world. And I feel like that's really that's what I want both of my kids to know, how to do. And but is that a skill? Like, is there a manual for that? No, that's the stuff that the rest of us are flailing around figuring out,
And we need to. I mean, I'm looking at the collective, and I mean, just like taking social media, for example, and how we don't know how to have conversations with each other, like diplomatic conversations that respect each other's opinions. For example, that's like one whole topic. And as I look at that, I think, okay, how did I prepare my kids to be in a world where people don't know how to respect each other and have diplomatic conversations? Oh, I married somebody with whom I could not have any diplomatic conversations for 20 years. Okay. That's their father. And so, yeah, and it still doesn't happen. It just is like a complete shutout, right? Like there's no willingness to have diplomatic conversations whatsoever. So that's how it happened, is they've been living it actually. And then, so how do we move through that? Well, I think that we demonstrate, like we become that new model, right? We become the new demonstration. And the thing about becoming the new demonstration is that it's not clear for a little while that you're doing something different. Like it's a subtle thing. There's nuances. So when you've got something big and clunky in the space, and then you try to point out nuances, that's a little challenging for anybody to see the nuances when this big glaring clunky thing is in the space. Right? So you got to like just be patient with it and just keep knowing that as you're refining and you're refining and refining and refining and being a demonstration of all the things that you've learned on your journey, right? Like that I've learned on my journey too. Like that is sinking in at some level that's profound. And at some point, just like you had your epiphany in 2017 and I had mine a little, at a different time, it clicks. It all of a sudden it goes, oh, that's what my mom was always saying, or, oh, that's what is going on here. And it clicks. And so like, I like to think of motherhood as like, planting seeds and not to argue with the circumstances, because as we have to be fearless, like you said, we have to be fearless and courageous as moms to go through our own inner exploration as a priority, and knowing that that is going to be teaching our kids way more than anything we could say to them to their face and then go do something in the other room. Like we have to be transparent and vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked with experts, from different varieties of like parenting, and childhood development and stuff like that. Obviously age appropriate has always got to be the right thing. You can't overwhelm little children with all of your adult problems like that. Again, that's trauma.
Exactly. That's traumatizing.
Yeah, that is traumatizing. But it's, my big, the thing that actually helps bring me just a little bit of peace over everything that, we've talked about this journey and that we have to live through some of these experiences. And I do think, I sit there and have this conversation with myself. It seems unfair that I had to do that. Like that's an honest human feeling. It feels unfair that I had to do that. Like, I feel like I'm a good human being. So why did I have to go through that? And then you get through that and you're like, well, I went through it so that I can help. And I also look at my kids. It's unfair that they had to go through what they've had to go through so far. The solace, however, though, is like you said, is that I'm mindful of they are witnessing in real time what challenges look like, because they're always going to be challenges, no matter how perfect and pristine we want to think we can set our kids up for, 100% success. The reality is that our world is, goods and bads, ups and downs. And so many of us never learned how to make it through the downs so that we can rise up to get to the goods. That's this resilience. And when that is what you're demonstrating, like, hey, I can go from being down here to, financially in a terrible situation, emotionally in a terrible situation. I'm not going to, tell you that life's going to get better. I'm going to show you how you make life better. I'm going to show you by going and doing my work on myself and applying it. And I'm going to show you that it is hard and that it is messy, but it is possible. And when I do succeed, I'm going to let you know I'm succeeding. And you're going to see that so that you can see that there is a way out of everything that we can, that we go through. And that does matter. I mean, we do think about so much of like, it is about being directive and dictatorial to our kids. But the reality is I can think of all the, subconscious messages and the indirect things that actually got, really into my head, because it was the behavior that was modeled every single day, not the words that were ever said, because barely any words were said to me on what to do. Like I was a self-starting, again, highly capable. I didn't need the parent who barely made it out of high school telling me how to be a straight A student. Like I just did that on my own. But it was the rest of it, how she showed up every day, how she talked and treated me and other people and all that other stuff. That's what got into my head and became some of the behaviors and beliefs that I believed about myself. And so showing up as a parent in that way, and thinking like, then it makes parenting easy and hard, because now I think about every single day, how am I showing up? It's not, did I give some pithy, great advice to my son as he left for work today? It's like, no, that's, he doesn't remember that stuff or what I text him, but every day you realize that you are on and they are watching, even if they aren't consciously watching. The environment that you set is being absorbed and brought in and programmed in for them. And that's why I said that's what makes parenting then hard. It's a conscientious effort and a mindfulness of, am I modeling the behavior I want my kids to know? Am I teaching them something through my own actions, my own words, the way I treat people and the way I treat myself? Is something that I want them to be able to have expectations for themselves in their lives and with the people that they cohabitate and create relationships with. And you never get off the hook. I mean, you can make a mistake, but then you have to own your mistake and come back to, and that becomes your teaching moments. Like, wow, I blew it there. And let me tell you about how I did that and why and what I'm going to do differently. I mean, so that you can do some course corrections if you can, because we are humans.
Yeah, we are human. That's the thing. It's like this idea of the perfect mom is kind of, you're already perfect. Like, this is where I like to back up, because this is where I had to go to myself because of all the things that I went through, all the things that I endured. I thought I was ready to have kids at 30, after all this. I even had psychotherapy, had all this stuff under my belt. I felt like, gosh, I'm gonna ace this, like I'm gonna ace this exam, like
I was the same. Yeah.
I'm gonna produce these great kids and I'm gonna do it better than my parents and all this. And I found out, some stuff along the way. But what's interesting is I really judged myself for not being perfect because I'd been so accustomed to getting approval from perfection that I like, that's for me was the journey of like breaking down the inner narcissist inside of me that I wanted everybody to think everything was perfect, or just wanted like everything to be perfect. And if it wasn't like perfect according to my definition of perfect, then I didn't know what to do with that. And that's why my son was such a great teacher for me. So it's like we have to realize like our children are also teaching us. Like as much as we're teaching them, they're like these magnificent souls that already have lifetimes under their belts, and they're teaching us too. And so we have to be teachable, and I feel like that's the new parenting, is the realization of that delicate balance between, I'm taking care of your needs to a certain age. I realize I'm programming you right now because your little body doesn't have the ability to say no to anything I'm telling you till 7 years old. And so there's this huge amount of respect for like what's going into the soup, during that time. And then there's like this willingness to be teachable. Like I've told my kids from I don't remember, that maybe like junior high, I started saying it. I have learned so much from being your mom. You are such a great teacher. You have such amazing innate wisdom. It's like powerful what you have to share. I always learn so much from you. And to everybody else around me, they just thought I was like, God, why are you doing that? You're supposed to be the authority, And I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm supposed to be authority. I feel like I'm supposed to teach my child how to be their own authority, and to point out to them like moments where I see them being brilliant. Like, wow, you just taught me something. And to be willing to be humble enough to say to my child, like, I'm your parent, but you just taught me something really powerful. That I feel like is really a new model. I'm getting some success from it. Of course, then I have kids who think, yeah, I raised myself, mom. And I said, you did. Part of me is like, "What, little rascal, I totally have been there for you this whole time. What are you talking about?" But I was like, okay, no, he did. He raised himself. Let's just let it be that, right? Because then if he
Mhm.
knows he raised himself, then he doesn't need me, you know? And that's one of the things I was talking about my husband last night. I was like, he's going to college. Man, he's going to college. He doesn't need me anymore. I said, but and he looked at me, he said, he hasn't needed you in years. I'm like, I know. I'm in the house every day. He doesn't need me. That's his
Mhm.
own really, like, really weird feeling, you know, because almost like part of me wants to be needed, right? So that's another little sneaky codependent place.
Mhm.
There's a
Yeah.
lot to this conversation.
Yeah, because it's a complicated
It is.
subject, you know? Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, what you said about, the teachable moments. And I think that that is something that our children can trigger us, because they can trigger the wounds that we have that are unresolved. Like I said, when, my daughter, and for example, when her, very strong personality, comes out. I mean, her name is Reese, and I named her before she was born, and it's a Welsh name, and it's usually given to Welsh kings, but it means fiery and enthusiastic. And so even in utero, like, in my stomach, there was this sense of her personality. And I mean, so I remember going into an exam, and the doctor's like poking at the stomach, and she's trying to feel around, and Reese is just like circling around inside, avoiding all of the contact. I mean, it was like this, and the doctor's like, she won't sit still for me. She's just like avoiding me every time I go to poke her or touch her or try to, get. And I was like, well, I mean, there she is, right? She came out that way. I mean, she is that, like, the sense of who she is. And so then when, as a teenager, she's evolving into this, strong spirited person. I am feeling two things at one time. I'm feeling my own mother, who was very, just overreacted to everything. If something was going on, it was just freaking crisis mode, yelling, screaming, shouting, and all that other stuff, just super intensity, which for my small human, it was very frightening and scary for me. So then I would get those feelings of that fear of being overwhelmed by this just vomit of intense emotions on top of my little head, just to get me to do something and behave the way she wanted me to behave. Right. So that triggers me in. And then the other part sometimes that would get triggered is the teenager who was sick of all of that and was finally just like, shut up and get out of my face and leave me alone. I can't wait to get out of here. So then you're in mom mode, trying to figure out and how to navigate that.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
a
then
lot.
you realize, like, at some point, like, okay, what is the mother she needs right now? I'm learning from her interactions how to control all of those things going on inside of my head. And that's great. I'm learning how to get a better understanding of my own inner child and my own inner wounds because of the interaction with my daughter. So instead of shutting down, it's like, God, this is great. I call it, we're sculpting. Right. So like, you talk about the big thing in nuances, and it's hard to see, like, in the big block of marble, the nuances, because it hasn't gotten revealed yet. But you get to take sandpaper out and start to smooth out some of these little things. Right. And that's where, the kids actually, if you allow them and that experience to, again, pull back and go, wow, this interaction really triggered me in this way. That's something for me to work on. My daughter has nothing to do on her end. Like, maybe there is some behavior correction because it's, whatever it is, but I'm not putting the responsibility on her to change her behavior. I'm mom. The responsibility is on me to understand why I'm reacting to this way, and whether or not there's something on my shoulders that I need to take care of in my own inner world. You
Totally.
know?
Yeah, exactly. And the willingness to do that work. And I think even to be transparent about it. Like, because there's been several times where something has happened with me and one of my sons, and I'm like, oh, and then I go in through the patterns, and I'm seeing, and I'm saying, oh, I see what's going on right now. And then I'll even, like, like when they were older, like teenage years, I'd be like, guess what? Do you want to hear this? And they'd be like, yeah, what? And I just realized something profound. You know how your grandma's like this and like this and this, and I'm like, and we just said this, and do you see the similarity of that? And like, I just realized that. And they'll, a lot of times they'll be like, yeah, okay, I see that. So it's like that, it's like pulling out the moment and just like revealing it even in that level of like, but you have to be neutral about it to
Mhm.
do that. If you're still
Yeah.
triggered, then that's not a space to be sharing.
Yeah. No, definitely not. And I've done the same thing too. Like, I'm able to If I do respond from a triggered state, quickly, usually it's like no, or, whatever. We now have language in our house to be able to say, like, listen, all of us, my daughter knows, like, listen, I'm not in the state to have a conversation right now. I need my space. Leave me alone. And we honor it. It's like safe words, right? Once you say the safe word, you're done. Like, you're out. Nobody pushes, nobody keeps violating that. We all get to say, listen, I'm at the limit. I actually need to go take a breath. I love you, but I'm going to leave just so that I can get my own heart rate back down. I'm not leaving you. I'm not abandoning you. You've done nothing wrong, but I need to get myself, because I'm feeling really amplified and triggered, and I need to re-regulate. And we all get to do that with each other in the house, and then be able to come back and go, man, when you said this is how I felt about it, and talk out loud, so that then the kids can actually see how to bring that conversation skill set into their own selves, and to be able to, and that's empathy building as well, right? Because when I share with you what's going on inside of my head, we learn then, okay, so when I start to sense this in other people, I might start to get an idea of what's going on in their inner world, especially if they're unable to communicate that with me. And not everybody can, right? But you become more of like this, empathy Jedi when you start to learn and do that. But that's the
Empathy
skills of
Jedi.
being able to teach them. And you can only do that by being vulnerable, by being reflective, curious. Curious is a huge thing. I'm curious about why this happened. I'm going to think about this for a bit, and then be able to come back and go, you know what? I actually responded in this way. I'm sorry, because actually I didn't, that was a trigger response. It wasn't really how I felt, but I instantly felt this. And then I did this, and that's not really what I meant. So let's go back to this. Let's talk about this again. And then let's see where I'm at, because I'm actually calmed down now that we've had, and I know that between my kids, my daughter's really gotten so good at it. I'm so impressed with her. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I think to myself, as the mom who felt like she failed, I look back and go, holy crap, these kids have skills I never had. They have a house that I never lived in. They have an ability to do these things and express these things and to learn these skills. I can only imagine how amazing their future is for them. Because if I had that, I think about like what could have, right? That's the whole game that we can get ourselves into it. But I feel so much better that, again, I wouldn't have been able to do that without that crappy journey that I had been through, without having to push myself to grow and self-reflect. And I knew that if I made myself focused and dedicated to it, that I could get into in time, hopefully, to get into my children's lives when it would matter. And so to be able to see that 4 years down the road, it allows me to breathe a little bit more easily. I know my work isn't done, but it really does matter when you put yourself into it and you dedicate yourself to it, that and you show up again daily, showing up for them. And so that does, I'm like, just like I said, my mind is blown. I have these conversations with their dad. I'm like, God, the emotional intelligence on this girl, mind blowing. I mean, I'm just impressed with it, because once it started to connect, it's just like, it's an exponential growth, right there for her. And I'm so proud of that for her.
Yeah, well, Ameé, it's because of the woman that you were. It's because of the woman you were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 3 years ago, that you became the mother you are today. And so much grace for that journey. Anybody who's been listening and really resonating with this conversation, I just hope that what you take away is that there's no problem and you didn't do anything wrong. And this part of the journey, and your kids chose you for that journey. So they came on to learn, like, you look what your daughter has learned in the process of you healing and learning and becoming your authentic self, and that what she's gotten to witness and be a part to this whole time, which is going to set her off on such a beautiful course. So it's not about like avoiding problems. It's really about diving in and doing the work and revealing it. So beautiful case example of that courage to fall apart and to put yourself back together.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
I love it. I love your story, and I love your energy, and I love what you bring into the world with your podcast. I'm going to encourage everybody out there, please go check out Ameé's podcast, One Broken Mom. I'm, of course, going to be on there too, so I'll put a link in the show notes whenever that's available. And I want you to go subscribe and like and all that. And hey, please do it for Soul Nectar Show too, because that's how we get messages out there. That's how, search engines make sure that other people who might be looking for this find the information, is when you engage in the content. So please like, subscribe, make a comment, share. that really helps us get the messages out. And we're going to give you kisses. So I always give people kisses on the way out. Here we go.
Okay. All right. And I'm taking it in.
Love you all, everybody. See you next week on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken, awake, Nectar Show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar, from the source of who you are. Soul Nectar Show. Yeah, yeah.